Right. Okay. Iris. Okay.
Uh,
Oh, it's frozen. 1 second. Yes, here we go. Right, off you go.
Korach incites a mutiny, challenging Moses' leadership and the granting of the kahuna priesthood to Aaron. He is accompanied by Moses' inveterate foes, Dathan and Abiram. Joining them are 250 distinguished members of the community who offer the sacrosanct ketoret, incense, to prove their worthiness for the priesthood. The earth opens up and swallows the mutineers, and a fire consumes the ketoret offerers. A subsequent plague is stopped by Aaron's offering of ketoret. Aaron's staff miraculously blossoms and brings forth almonds to prove that his designation as high priest is divinely ordained. God commands that a teruma, uplifting from each crop of grain, wine, and oil, as well as all firstborn sheep and cattle and other specified gifts, be given to the Kohanim priests.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the story of Korach. Yeah, we've got the rebels. We've got Moshe's response, and it's interesting. It's the aftermath of the spies. Why would it be the aftermath of the spies? So the Ramban, Nachmanides, explains that it's no accident, right? People are longing to enter the promised land, and suddenly they find that they've been set back by 40 years, and it's a good time to challenge Moshe. You're not delivering. He's managed in the past to get through things, but this generation is going to die in the wilderness. They've got nothing to lose, so they launch a challenge, leadership bid. Who are the rebels? Right, so we just said in that they're not a unified group, right? We know in Pirkei Avos it says, what's an example of a machlokes, of an argument? It says Korach b'chol adasai, Korach and all of his congregation. Why Korach and his congregation? Because they were at odds with each other as well. They didn't all have the same issue, right? You often find this. I look all this pro-Palestine stuff. There's different people with different agendas. So you've got Korach himself. Korach is Moshe's cousin. Says, why did I miss out? Moshe was right. So you had Kahos, who was the son of Levi, and Kahos had Amram and Yitzhar, right? Moshe, of course, was the son of Amram, as was Aaron. Kahos was the oldest son of Yitzhar. Korach was the oldest son of Yitzhar. So Korach felt that he had a claim to, I'm the oldest son of my father. Why should all the honors go to Moshe and Aaron? Fine, give Moshe one honor and then give the other to another branch of the family. That was his, right? Then we had Datan Vaviram, who you might recall were descendants of Reuben. So they had their own axe to grind, because Reuben, of course, was the firstborn, right? They were troublemakers. And then there were 250 others described as distinguished members of the community who maybe they felt they should have been leaders on meritocracy, or they were firstborn who resented losing the status of the firstborn. So you've got a few different people with different issues. You've got people with family issues, and you've got people just generally riled up. And what was
the members of the community, the 250, maybe think, well, you've told us, God's told us that we're going to be a kingdom, a nation of priests.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why can't we be part of the actual priesthood?
Yeah. All valid reasons, right? Also, look at look what's happening with the elections. Incumbent prime minister who is probably going to lose the election, I suspect. Now, he may or may not. I thought he was quite a decent prime minister. I don't know. Suddenly, it's all gone pear-shaped. I don't know. Would Keir Starmer be better? I don't know. But it's much harder when you're the guy in power, because you have to actually deliver on your. It's much easier to be the leader of the opposition. It's very easy for Korach to say, well, Moshe's failed or whatever. It's not easy being in leadership. And, when they get to this point where they're 40 years in the desert and the spies, then people start to really push back against Moshe. So, and it's not a respectful challenge, right? Datan Aviron say to him, enough. Rav Lachem b'nei Levi says, son of Levi, you've taken too much. Back off. Stop being so greedy. And it throws Moshe. And what does Moshe do? He turns to God. And what does he say? This is what he says. Who'd like to read number 1?
Do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them.
Okay. Did anyone accuse him of stealing donkeys? Did anyone accuse him of impropriety? No. They just said, you're not a good leader. We want to be leaders. Or why did we miss out on the yichus? So it's a strange response, right? It's very discordant. It's a bit like a child when you challenge them on something, say, I didn't do anything wrong. Why? I never did anything to him. We didn't. No one accused you of doing something wrong per se. It's not personal, right? Moshe was appointed by God. So actually, who's Korach challenging? He's challenging God, challenging Moshe, right? I mean, he might be, but ostensibly, he might be saying, look, Moshe, you failed to get the people into the promised land. But this is a challenge to the hierarchy, to the structure, right? If anyone's ever been in a position of authority, rabbis have this, teachers have this, any managerial or position or authoritarian, parents sometimes have this, right? That because of what you represent, there is resentment. There's resentment because right now you're the parent telling the kid to go to bed. Do they hate you? Of course they don't hate you. They hate what you represent at this moment in time, right? People upset with the rabbi because he represents authority, because I don't know, they can't have their child's intermarriage in the shul, or whatever it is. People are upset with the teacher because they said you can't go, I don't know, you have to stay in during break. So are they upset with Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Cohen or Rabbi Jones? On the surface, yes, but it's what you represent, right? It's not something personal to you. Are they upset with Moshe? I mean, look, they say, Moshe, you failed. You've grabbed too much yourself. Everything he did is Hashem's bidding. And is it personal? He takes it very personally. He says, I never did anything to them, right? It's almost like whinging. What happens then? Hashem says he will punish the whole congregation. And Moshe and Aaron say, don't punish them, just punish the rebels. So Hashem tells Moshe, separate the community from the rebels, so they not be caught up in the punishment, which he does. And then what happens next? Moshe basically lays down the gauntlet to God. Let's see. Who'd like to read number 2?
I'll read it, Bilal. This is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things, and that it was not my idea. If these men died natural deaths and suffered the fate of all humankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the realm of the dead, then you will know that these men had treated the Lord with contempt.
So I don't know if Hashem told Moshe to tell them this, but Moshe lays down the gauntlet. He says, if they die a natural death and they suffer the fate, in other words, basically, if nothing untoward happens, don't think he means die now, by the way, right? So if nothing untoward happens to them, then you'll know I'm a fake. But if something, weird and wonderful happens, or weird and, I don't know if wonderful, swallowing people up, weird and wacky happens, and the earth opens and swallows them up, then you'll know that I'm telling the truth. I think we had this year last year, and I think we discussed this, and I think we said that you would think that once all the people got swallowed up by the earth, that would be the end of the rebellion. And what is it that finally ends the rebellion is when Aaron's staff shoots, right, and blossoms. And we said that people are only really happy when they see a potential for growth, potential for positivity, right? As long as the animosity is there and the negativity, right, being confrontational, getting the earth to swallow them up, solves the problem short term, but it doesn't really solve it. By the way, you could apply this to Gaza, and I don't have the answers. One of the things that obviously is very troubling about Gaza is that, people say that, for every Hamas terrorist that is dealt with, someone else will become radicalized. And a lot of people say that are people I don't agree with. It's the left wing and it's the Americans and whatever. But there's some truth in that. You know, you're not going to be able to deal with every single terrorist. So you have to do something more fundamental than that, right? A show of strength and shock and awe will achieve a short-term goal, but the long term is much, much harder. I don't have the answers. But what happens as a result of this? Shem does as Moshe asks. What would you think would happen if you personally witnessed a bunch of, I mean, I don't know, I probably shouldn't even say this, but let's just say, to be slightly humorous, if, I don't know, all the independent candidates who are anti-Semitic would suddenly get swallowed up by the ground, you would think people would stop running as independents, right? Well, I'll give you another scenario, by the way. The Kohen Gadol, when he went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, if he wasn't worthy, he would basically pass away and they would have to schlep him out, but because no one else was allowed in there. He used to tie a rope around his foot or something, right? So you would think to yourself, surely after the first guy went in who wasn't worthy, people would start to say, I'm not worthy. If they were a political appointee or they weren't religious enough, they weren't pious, they would refuse it. But there's none so queer as folk. And even after people saw that the Kohen Gadol literally died because he wasn't worthy, people still wanted to do it. So even after all these people got swallowed up by the earth, instead of having the effect of stopping the rebellion, which presumably is what Moshe was trying to achieve when he asked God to do this, what happens next? Anyone remember?
They separate everybody.
Sorry?
They separate everybody.
No, that's before that. So they separate everyone, and then the rebels get swallowed up by the earth, and you would think that would be the end of the matter. What's the first thing they do next day? Go on, Brenda, do you want to read?
Oh, the next day, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. You have killed the Lord's people, they said.
So despite the earth opening up and swallowing the rebels, which you think would be a pretty effective sign to people that God is on Moshe's side, you better stop messing with him. What actually happens is the people just become more argumentative. They say, look what you've just done. You've killed the Lord's people. So actually doesn't achieve peace and tranquility at all. The people gather around Moshe and Aaron. It looks like they're going to attack them. And then a plague starts. Moshe tells Aaron to do something. Says nearly 15,000 people died. And what finally brings the rebellion to an end is the blossoming of Aaron's staff and when it bears fruit. So the question is this: was Moshe's intervention effective? Was it right? Was it a tragic mistake? Seems like God doesn't tell him to go to the people and tell them this. He asks Hashem to destroy them, and Hashem accedes to his request. But ultimately, it doesn't calm the situation at all. Now, you might say, it's a bit like saying, put dangerous people in prison to keep them off the streets. Does it reform them? No, but it gets them off the streets. So you might say the fact that Korach is gone and he was the ringleader means that it was an effective intervention. But the question is, was it? So let's see what an expert on leadership from Harvard University has to say about this. That called Hayford Zimlinsky wrote about leadership. Pamela Julian, would you like to read? Can't hear you.
Sorry.
Oh,
Right. Start again.
Right.
It's a common ploy to personalize the debate over issues as a strategy for taking you out of action. You want to respond when you are attacked. You want to leap into the fray when you are mischaracterized. When people attack you personally, the reflexive reaction is to take it personally. But being criticized by people you care about is almost always a part of exercising leadership. When you take personal attacks personally, you unwittingly conspire in one of the common ways you can be taken out of action. You make yourself the issue.
Right. It's understandable. It's like a defensive reaction. It's very easy to take it personally when you're attacked and you respond in person, which is what Moshe does. He takes it personally, right? But the reality is there's a bigger picture. How does he take it personally? First of all, when they say to him, who do you think you are? He defends himself to God and he says to God, these people who are, please do something about them. And then he asks God to show them. But What was the first thing Moshe did? He said, you'll bring an incense offering. We'll see which offering the Lord chooses, right? That would have resolved the question in a very spiritual way. Nobody would have got hurt. Yes? That was the initial thing. That would have been great. Then he goes a step further and says, please swallow up these people. And as a result of that, causes further insurrection. Right? Korach basically provoked him. And he says, why do you set yourself above everyone else? And said, why do you lord it over us? It was very personal. Moshe took it personally and he responded in kind. You can understand why. But actually, it's not an attack on him because he didn't appoint himself. It's an attack on God who appointed him. So don't take it personally. Turn around and say, don't argue with me, go argue with God. Argue with God.
Surely Hashem should have said this to Moses. Look, give them an opportunity to show that it's not them who should be offering, that it's Aaron. And instead of immediately agreeing with Moses and killing the lot of them.
So it's interesting. I'm only noticing this now. We read this every year. We normally say that there are two things we're told traditionally that Moshe did of his own bat, which Hashem didn't tell him to do, but Hashem acceded to. One was the breaking of the tablets, and the other was the sending of the spies. Right? God says to him, Shlach lecha, send for yourself. Don't do it for me. If you want to send spies, if you feel that's necessary, do it. Seems
And
like
the striking of the rock.
Right. Well, and the stick, which obviously was wrong. Yeah. But here, actually, it seems like I have to go back and look at the text to check I got this right. But it seems to me that he's also using his own initiative, which is quite unusual. Now, if this was anyone else and it wasn't Moshe, I would turn around and say, this is what empowering leaders is all about. You don't have God whispering in your ear. You have to figure it out for yourself, except that Moshe normally does have God whispering in his ear. So it's interesting that he's left to his own devices somewhat to deal with it. The first thing he comes up with is very sensible. He says, we'll see whose offering is accepted. But then he says, whoever's making trouble will be swallowed up by the earth, and that will be the test. All right? And that causes havoc amongst the people. They come to the next day and they challenge him.
What happened?
Sorry?
No, it's nothing. It's just a noise, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just a noise, I think. And there's a problem also. He's starting to get wound up. Right? What happens when you get angry? You have every reason to be angry. He's angry because they're attacking him, or they're not attacking him. They're attacking the institution he represents. But nonetheless, he's getting angry, right? People attack the monarchy. They're not attacking King Charles personally. They're attacking the institution of the monarchy. But I'm sure he would still take it very personally, right? If you're the chief rabbi and somebody says, I don't agree with having a chief rabbi, it's this, it's that, it's corrupt, it's this, it's that. Oh, I'm not attacking you personally, chief rabbi, I'm just attacking the institution. Okay, it still feels pretty personal. And what happens? He strikes the rock. Anyone remember why he struck the rock? What the traditional explanation we're given is?
Because he did it before.
That's one reason. There's another reason. What
out.
state of mind was he in when he struck the rock?
Anger.
He was angry.
He was angry because people were bothering him. Like, come on, we want some water. Let's see exactly what he says and the tone of voice when he strikes the rock. Who'd like to read? I think two Iris.
No,
sorry, Pam. Go.
Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock? Rabbi, I also read years ago, because I had to do a Devar Torah on this when I was on a course.
Right.
And one of the things was that Moses was mourning the death of Miriam.
Right.
That could have affected how he spoke to the congregation.
So, by the way, leaders are human. Moshe is human. So it's very easy to criticize. You know, if you're a rabbi, you're a head teacher, you're I don't know, anything, a doctor, and you know you've just had a bereavement or you've been through a trauma. Sorry, just picked up a book before. You know, and you're having a bad day. And someone asks you something and you snap at them and they get all upset. The rabbi snapped at me, you know, the head teacher snapped at me. Well, he's going through a very, very difficult time. Well, that's not the point. We don't, right? So there's certain expectations. And Moshe's human at the end of the day, and we should recognize that. But yes, when you start to get wound up by things, it doesn't do you any good. And what happens to the water? What does he say? Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of the rock? Right? He's personalizing it. You're expecting us to get water for you out of the rock. It's not personal, right? Hashem is the one that's been giving you all your food and water. So your argument is with Hashem. So he's taking it personally again. And it's showing that. Now, let's just be fair. What was Moshe's greatest strength? Why was he pointed in the first place? Well, what was the first thing he did? He saw the Egyptian and he said, why are you striking the Hebrew slave? Right? And he was a defender of the weak. And, he was a warrior for justice. That was his strength and that was also his weakness. So his anger at injustice. Moshe's going for a job interview and they'll say, do you have any weaknesses? He'll say, yes, I can't stand to see injustice. I'm a warrior for justice. Say, sometimes that means that I take things personally because I feel that I've been hard done by. But that's the price of my being a very just, fair-minded person. Right? You might go for an interview and someone say, do you have any weaknesses? Yes, I'm a very sensitive person. Very sensitive to others, but also sensitive to criticism. So his very quality that makes him a great leader might also be the one that makes him easily provoked. Right? Because he doesn't like injustice. He doesn't like seeing the underdog suffer, the little guy suffer. So when he's the little guy suffering, he also doesn't like it. According to the Rambam in his 8 chapters, which is a work, which is Introduction to Pirkei Avot, where he talks about different character traits, he talks about anger and he gives this example. He says this is what led to the unraveling of Moshe's leadership, is basically his anger and his being, starts with Korach and it carries on, we see, and he gets fed up to the point where when they want water, instead of saying, you poor people, you need water, you're starving, he says, you rebels, well, what do you want me to do? Get water out of this rock for you? What do you think I am? And it takes it all personally. So we've had the spot. So here's Mr. Chafetz again, talking about anger. I'll just read this. She says, receiving anger, it's interesting, is a sacred task. Taking the heat with grace communicates respect for the pains of change. Not easy. Receiving anger is not easy. As somebody, if you work in a service industry, I do a lot of work with the Burial Society. I have a role at the moment. I'm a liaison for the RCUS with the Burial Society. So RCUS is the Rabbinical Council. So basically, when there's issues between with rabbis or between rabbis, I act as a liaison, and as a result of that, I've got to know quite a lot of the staff better than I did before. And they're on the receiving end of a lot of anger and a lot of abuse, because people who are grieving are often very emotional, and they get to the cemetery, and for example, could be the 3 siblings that haven't spoken in 20 years and they're thrown together by a bereavement. And there's a poor staff member trying to get everyone to be quiet and switch off their phones and sit down. And they take out their frustrations on that staff member, or the rabbi for that matter. It's not right, but we know it's not personal. It's not okay, by the way. It's not mentioned, but it's not personal. They've got nothing against that person. It's what they represent. It's very hard to receive anger. It's not easy.
Sometimes you've got nobody else to take your anger out. It could be anything, by not getting a delivery or something, and you ring up and you say, well, I'm not talking about you, but can you do something?
Right. Right. So, it's human nature, but
it's the kick the cat syndrome.
Sorry? It's
the kick the cat syndrome.
Right.
If there's no one else to blame, kick the cat. Right. Or, your supermarket deliveries arrives 5 minutes before Shabbos because they got mixed up and they did it 8 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. And the driver arrives and he says, I'm really sorry, I just did what I was told. And you have a meltdown. And you say to him afterwards, I'm really sorry, it's not you, it's not your fault. Right? It's not okay, but it happens. So the ability to take that with grace is a function of leadership, and to recognize this person who's being grumpy, or I'm not saying anyone should have to tolerate abuse, but in the bigger scheme of things, this person is being rude or ungracious. It's not personal. They'd be doing it whoever was standing here right now. This is not about me. They just take out their frustrations about their situation. So Moshe's got this task. They've had the incident of the spies. The people now know that they're not going to enter the promised land.
as we've said previously, the thing that ultimately stops the rebellion is a sign of hope. It's Aaron's rod blossoming and growing and bearing fruit, which is in itself miraculous. Why? Because that's the consolation. The consolation is that you have some kind of growth. The consolation, I suppose it's like saying, you know, can you punish kids into submission? Well, yes, you can. Does it work? Not really. Right? You can keep saying to a kid, if you don't do your homework, I'm going to put you in detention. And you know, I remember in school, I used to row in school. Why did I row in school? I used to play football. I hated it. And we had a football coach who was a South African gentleman. He was very nice, actually. But somehow the kids used to rile him up. And whenever they messed around in football, he would keep them back for 5 minutes. You know how it is with kids, right? Why don't you just stop talking and being cheeky so you can get let out? But no, someone always has to giggle or be cheeky. And we got kept him for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. You think, why are these kids doing this? You know, why don't they just be quiet? Because that's human nature. You just rebel more. So when the ground swallows up these people, the response of human beings, instead of saying, right, I better just stop being chutzpahdik now and just calm down, is to say, gosh, that's unbelievable. Moshe, what have you done? And just exacerbate the whole situation. It's only when they say, look at this, we need to blossom, we need to bear fruit, that people finally calm down. So Moshe, the greatest leader that ever lived, still got angry, got wound up, he took it personally, he responded in a very personal way. I never touched their donkeys. So we should know that even the greatest sometimes take things personally, that's number one. But also that it basically leads to a chain of events, which is not a positive one. So let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say. Who'd like to read? Julian, you're always good with Rabbi Sachs. Would you like to read that?
Okay. Though it may seem otherwise, anger you face has nothing to do with you as a person and everything to do with what you stand for and represent. Depersonalizing attacks is the best way to deal with them. People get angry when leaders cannot magically make harsh reality disappear. Leaders in such circumstances are called on to accept that anger with grace. That truly is a sacred task.
It's a big challenge. Even Moshe struggles with it. It's a huge, huge challenge. But it's one that pays off in the long term. Right, there we go. It's actually 11 o'clock. We haven't finished it. Oh, 5 to 11. We'll start a bit later. Right. Any comments, questions? Always say with these things, it's very easy to criticize. Some people say you shouldn't ever criticize biblical figures because they're very holy, special people. It's very easy to criticize with the benefit of hindsight. I don't think anyone could withstand the amount of aggravation that Moshe had from the people. And yet he still stood by them time and again and defended them to God. So once in a while, he lost his rag. You can't blame him for that. You see how calm you have to be. Again, going back to analogy, no one will blame a school teacher for occasionally losing their temper, but you know what? It's not worth it.
I wonder to what extent he was regarded as alien, you know, having grown up in the Egyptian court, which no doubt gave him some of the leadership qualities anyway.
Yeah.
Whether he was resented for his background.
Don't know. I've always wondered that. It never seems to be mentioned anywhere.
No.
You know, I mean, when Moshe and Aaron go to Pharaoh and the people get harder work as a result, then they resent it. They say, look, what you've done to us. You know, you've waded in your size 12s, whatever. But in the beginning, it doesn't seem like that. Because that would have been a natural response of the Datan and Avira. If you remember, the reason that Datan and Avira were upset with him is because he saw them when they were fighting, right? And he got involved. So the natural thing would be for them to say, who are you, this prince that's come along, and you're this outsider? And they don't actually say that. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to know.
Oh, was that Dathan and Abiram who were arguing?
Yeah, they were the ones that.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, and they're the ones that said when Moshe says, why are you fighting? And they say, who are you to talk? We saw you kill the Egyptian and bury him, and that's when he gets afraid.
How do we know that it was Dathan and Abiram that two?
I think Rashi mentions it. I don't think it's explicit. I think Rashi mentions it in the oral tradition. I think Rashi mentions it.
Part of the oral tradition, yeah.
So, you know, things never happen in isolation, you know. if you know the whole backstory of Purim, Haman and Mordechai, there's a whole backstory. You know, things don't just happen in isolation. So these characters didn't just pop up one day and decide to be rebels, right? But what do? You know, look at Reform Party, right? You decide to start a new party. So you find a bunch of people. You find Nigel Farage, who's got UKIP background. You find a few disaffected Tory MPs, a few disaffected Labour MPs, a few nationalists, you know, and you find a sort of motley crew of people and you put them all together. They've all got different motivations, but you get them under one banner. That's what Korach does, essentially. That's often how rebellion works.
Yeah, but they can do a lot of damage. I mean, look what's happening in France. With the bomb.
Yes, they can, correct. No, 100%. I'm saying it's often the case that rebels and revolutionaries will be a motley crew of different people with different agendas, right? Okay, I better go. I'm going to go. We'll expect the help visitor, but anyway, there we go. Hopefully we're on for next week.
It's nice to be back.
Yes.
Yes, it is lovely.
So we'll have to look at the summer. We'll try to go for as long as we can. Once people start going away, we usually sort of fizzle out for a couple of weeks, but for now we're good.
We're not
Right.
going
Okay.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa.
Hey,
And
bye.
Beryl as
you?
well. Sorry, Beryl's on. We can't see you, but we do.
Hello,
see-
Hello, Beryl.
Hi, Beryl.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right.
Have a good week.
Have a good week,
Have a good
everyone.
week. Hi, Lisa.
Have a good week, everybody.